So, part of our weather unit, we have to talk about the tools and instruments that are used to help us predict weather and do a little predicting ourselves based on what we have learned. So, this lesson is on what they call meteorological tools, and we will get started. You'll know some of them, but other ones will be new. So, let's get started. All right, what's the weather like tomorrow? This is probably a question you ask every day. At least I know I ask it, especially before school, like the night before, so I can figure out what I'm wearing the next day because, I want to be prepared for what it's going to be like so that I'm not super cold because I dressed in shorts and a t-shirt in the dead of winter, or if I'm not too hot because I wore a heavy sweater and long pants in the spring, right? And I also don't want to be wet, like not have an umbrella or wear flip-flops and it's raining outside. Like that's just not good. It's not beneficial. So obviously I want to know what the weather's like so that I can prepare for that. So our meteorologists, which is what weathermen are called, like you probably know them as, oh, the weatherman said, which is true, but they're technically meteorologists. And they forecast the weather by reading different weather instruments, and they study how those readings change, and that is how they predict the weather for us, so that we can hopefully be informed and make good decisions about what we wear or what we go out and do, because obviously also if it's gonna be snowing, like you don't want to go have an outside picnic because it's gonna be really cold. So thanks to these meteorologists being professionals and being able to read these instruments, they help us be prepared for our days. But there are 4 particular tools that we're supposed to know on a little scale for us that we can also use at home if we even wanted to, or if we had them, to predict the weathers for ourselves. First tool that's used, you know very well, and may even have them at home, right? To determine what kind of clothes we want to wear every day, we need to know what the temperature is going to be. So our first tool is a thermometer, which again, you know really well, and it measures temperature, as I'm sure you're aware, right? It'll go up or down depending on the temperature. And what temperature is actually just the amount of energy in the air. So the warmer or hotter it is, there's more energy in the air, molecules are more excited. We learned about that in matter, right? As you heat them up, they get excited and they move faster, aka there's more energy in the air, temperature is higher. Okay, and remember when we go to read a thermometer, we read in degrees Celsius because science uses the metric system. I know we're more used to Fahrenheit for ourselves, which is okay, but we need to be or pretend or act like we are professional scientists. So when we go to read thermometers, we're reading them in degrees Celsius, all right? So in my little thermometer picture, right, the highest temperature it gets to is 30 degrees Celsius, which actually, yeah, that's about, it would be equivalent to about 84-ish degrees Fahrenheit, right? I mean, you can see them, they're about equal, and it starts at a little bit above 0 degrees Fahrenheit, but as we read in Celsius, it would probably be about negative, what is that line? Like negative 15 degrees Celsius. So it starts below freezing, obviously, and moves all the way up to 30 degrees Celsius. But anyway, you will have some practice reading thermometers, but don't put Fahrenheit, put down Celsius. All right, the next tool or instrument that meteorologists use that might not be as familiar to us, although you could buy them and have them at home if you'd want, are barometers, and they measure air pressure. We definitely need to know about barometers. We like to be asked about barometers a lot, about what they measure, which is air pressure, and how to read them, which I'll show you in a moment. When air pressure changes, the weather changes. So here's an example of what a barometer would look like. They vary sometimes. They can have pictures, they can have words, but they always have two hands, almost like a clock or arrows there. One's always black, one's usually gold, although you might see it silver, different colors. But one is always black. And then, yeah, sometimes they have pictures, sometimes they have words, and I'll explain how to read these in a moment. Okay, so if the pressure increases, so if you have your normal air pressure, because that's what you have to know first off in order to read one of these, you have to know what your normal air pressure or atmospheric pressure where you live is. Okay, so if you have your normal pressure and if that pressure increases, if it becomes more, obviously that's what increases means, then the weather should become clear, dry, and warmer. So more air pressure or high air pressure, happy weather, clear, dry, warmer. Okay. If the pressure from your normal atmospheric pressure drops or decreases, then low pressure air is obviously coming in, because if you have this and it drops, now it's low. Whereas when we increased it, now it's high. Okay. So your low pressure air is coming and storms are possible. I would even go to say storms are really likely, like they're gonna happen. They're not guaranteed, I guess, but they're probably gonna happen. Okay, so low pressure air and storms go together. It's yucky. High pressure, happy weather. Okay, so here's the other barometer example. Now, how do we read a barometer? How do we know if the air pressure went up or down, right? So both of these, as I said, you can see there is a black hand and a, in this case, gold hand, and they're at different spots. So let's focus on the top barometer first. The top barometer, the way it works is the gold hand you can actually twist and set. So you would take the gold hand and you will set that to your normal atmospheric pressure. So in this case, on the top barometer, it's set at 1,000. Okay, that's their normal atmospheric pressure. The black hand is the important one you need to watch, because the black hand is the one that changes depending on the pressure, like around it. So in the first top picture, you can see that the black hand went above the normal gold atmospheric pressure. When you first set these barometers, both the black hand and the gold hand are at the same spot, which is why you can watch the black hand move to decide if the pressure went up or down. Okay, so in the top picture, the pressure increased, so you can say, or you can expect, good, warm, dry weather. Okay, happy. As you can see, there's a little picture of a sun there. All right, the bottom barometer, right, you can see again, the gold hand is the one you'd set, you would match it up with your normal atmospheric pressure. That's where the black hand would start. Okay, I can't read, it looks like a 1010 or 1010 is where that gold one is set on the bottom barometer. All right, and so then day to day you can come check where the black hand has moved to see how the pressure has changed. So in this case, the bottom barometer, the black hand has decreased, it has gone down, the pressure has dropped, right? It has gone down to, I think that says like 990, okay? So 990 from 1010 or 1010, okay? So our black hand has dropped. It hasn't dropped a lot, right? But it has dropped. So you can expect that storms might be coming, or you watch it for another day or two, and if it drops more, then you know there's definitely going to be some storms coming because low pressure air has come into the area. Okay, and as you can see on the bottom barometer, they have words instead of pictures, and that black hand is moving towards rain, which would be your storms of low pressure. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. We will be practicing reading barometers because they like to go over that a lot on tests and different things. And it's actually kind of a cool skill to have in case you ever had a barometer. You could read it and you would know what to expect. All right, The next meteorological tool that you might not be as familiar with, but it's actually really easy. You could even make one at home if you wanted to have one. It helps us know about wind. So obviously knowing how windy a day is would be important in the real world for planes taking off, because if it's too windy, they can't, and things like that. But it's also good for us to know because then we can be properly dressed again. Because if it's super windy outside, I'm going to want a coat because it's probably going to be chilly, right? And so the tool we use for this is called an anemometer, and it measures wind speed. It looks like this. A lot of times they show it with 4 little cups. Sometimes it has 3 little cups, but they look pretty much the same, all right? And the little cups spin around and they measure how fast the wind's blowing because the wind is blowing in the cups and that's what making the cups spin. Pretty straightforward, pretty easy, right? That's why you could build one at home. You could take like clear plastic cups, and if you could mount them on like a wooden dowel and then like put them on top of a structure that you set outside, they'll blow around with the wind, okay? The faster those cups spin, the faster the wind is blowing, okay? Pretty straightforward because the wind is what's blowing the cups, so the faster the cups are moving, the faster the wind is moving. Pretty easy, all right? And if it's not spinning at all, then there's no wind because again, the wind is what's turning the cups. And so if they're not turning, then there's no wind. So this one hopefully is pretty easy. You guys like to confuse with the barometer for some reason, but the anemometer is our wind speed one. Okay, our barometer is our air pressure, all right? All right, last but not least, this one is really easy as far as it's very straightforward. You can also make one of these at home, and it goes with our rain, okay? So if you need to know, well, how much did it rain last night, right? If you live in Farmville, you know that a lot of times you can get floods, right? You flood a lot. So sometimes knowing how much it rained last night is important because if it was a lot, then you can expect, oh, well, then I can't drive on this road because it's going to be underwater kind of thing, right? Because the river overflowed or whatnot. So sometimes it's really good to know how much it rained last night. It would be really hard to measure without one of these gadgets, okay? And it is very simply called a rain gauge because it gauges rain gauge, okay? It measures the amount of precipitation that has fallen over a certain time, okay? And pretty much you can make one of these out of anything. Like you can use a normal cup. Now, normally you'd need measurements on the side, otherwise you wouldn't know how much rain fell, right? So a lot of times it would look something like this. Now, there are a bunch of different looks to rain gauges. I'll show you a couple of different ones, but pretty much what you're looking for a rain gauge is some kind of container with markings on the side, like lines, like measurements, so that you can say how much rain fell, like you know exactly how much rain. And obviously it would work for snow as well. That's why it's precipitation, because snow would also fill up that container. But most of the time it's used to measure rain. And again, not rocket science and very logical. The more water that's in the rain gauge, the more rain that fell. Directly related, right? The more water there is, the more it rained. Seems very straightforward, okay? Don't make it more complicated than it has to be. So some other pictures of different rain gauges, they can also look like this, where it's kind of like mounted on this wooden post, but it's like got this little tube on the inside of the container, or it can literally just be a cup mounted in the ground. What you can't see is that cup is on a stake that they pounded into the ground, okay? But you notice that all of these have measurements on them. Again, in science, we'd be measuring these in milliliters, okay, up the side. So if we wanted to know how much rain fell in our first main picture of a rain gauge, the water line looks to be slightly above that second line next to the 30. Remember, we're looking on the mm side. I'm not millimeters. Why? I don't know. Anyway, it should be an ml for milliliters, but that's fine. Didn't notice that, or I probably wouldn't have used that as an example. Sorry. But anyway, so because we measure liquid in liters, that just bothers me really much. Like, I'm sorry. So anyway, if you look up the left side there, right, we've got the 5 and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there are 4 hash marks before the 10. So that's telling me that each line is worth 1, right? Because that is something you need to check on your thermometers and your rain gauges, is how much the intervals are. How much is each line worth? Because it's not always just 1. It could be 2 or by 5s. You know, you got to check that. So anyway, so it is about 2 lines above 30, and since I figured out that pretty much each hash mark is worth 1, it would be 32 millimeters, which should be milliliters, whatever, of rain fell for that rain gauge. The other 2 are kind of too tiny to see, but if we looked at the bottom one, you can see where the water is. And if I lean in real close, sorry about my face, it looks like it's between the 20 and the 30 on the left side. So I'm going to go with, it's probably right about 25, it looks like. And I'm going to say milliliters because that's what it should be measured in. I can't actually see what measurements are on the cup, but yeah. So in that bottom picture, you would read that as about 25 milliliters. And again, we will practice this as well some more. But that is it for our meteorological tools that we're supposed to know. Rain gauge is pretty straightforward. Thermometer, you already know. Anemometer, as far as wind speed and how it works, pretty straightforward. You just have to remember that an anemometer is the wind speed one, and a barometer is the air pressure one, because we like to confuse those a lot. All right, but that's it for this, and I will see you later to practice reading these things to make sure we understand how to go about that.